the next thing is that has been strategic for us in city movements is the connection of local networks. Now, you guys, it depends on what country and cities that you're from, there's all kinds of larger networks. There's groups of Baptists that meet, there's groups of Pentecostals that meet, there's groups of Anglicans that meet, there's also groups of businesses that meet, there's Rotary clubs, there's all these different networks around town. So we inventoried some of those around our community, and we said, you get a lot more mileage if you can go to the Baptist gathering as opposed to every Baptist church. So what does that look like? And one of the first questions we always try to ask is not can we get them to come, but what is their vision? What's their vision as a group? How can we serve that? How can we add value to that? And we've had some successes with that. And I would encourage you, number one, to inventory kind of the networks that you know of. It's amazing how many different networks around town are about improving and making a difference in the community. So we have similar concerns, similar care, similar things, and yet we've never quite connected that to the value of GLS. And so here's a couple of the ones that we found. One of them was a foundation. It dawned on me one day, I thought about we have a lot of nonprofits or NGOs in our city. And it dawned on me one day as I was talking to some leaders of foundations that fund these nonprofits that one of their concerns is that these nonprofits run better. That if they're going to give money to them, are they really effective and efficient? And I thought, well, there's nothing that adds value and effectiveness and efficiency quite like the GLS. And so I talked to a couple of smaller ones, and they said, yeah, we would love it if some of our nonprofits would attend GLS. And I said, well, would you pay for them to go? Oh, absolutely. We'd be excited. So we had that happen. Then we finally ran into a foundation that's a large one in town, about a $100 million foundation. And we talked to them about this whole idea. And I discovered that in America, 75% of foundations that give money to nonprofits have a capacity building funding that they do. In other words, they give for the mission of the nonprofit, but they actually fund nonprofits getting better. And so it's very common in the States, and I have a feeling it is here too, that funding capacity building in the community is part of what they want to do as a foundation. They don't just want to fund activity, they want to fund movement that makes things better and makes things move forward. So we partnered with this foundation, and they now are our sponsor that funds and pays for our Civic Center because they got so excited about what we could do, and they got very excited about how we could improve nonprofits, but they loved the word collaboration, that we could create in the room a collaborative move forward as a city around businesses and government and schools and churches, and as a foundation, they wanted to be a part of that. So they now actually fund our logistics and our advertising and things that happen because it moved the ball down the field so much in improving the excellence and capacity of organizations in our city. So foundations, I don't know how that works in your country, but somehow there's money. I did look up in Sweden alone, there was 200,000 nonprofits. So I know that there's a few around. So there's some funding mechanisms, how those funds flow and how GLS can help improve the people that receive those funds is an interesting discussion and a network to look into in every city. The second network that was big for us was we have in town a gathering of churches, and it's called a City Movement Network. The thing that I really like about it, there's a lot of gatherings in churches around the U.S. and around the world. They come together and they pray and they talk about some things, but this network was all about a learning network. So when they bring pastors and leaders of churches together, they're teaching them ways to move the city forward. And you can see this is just their webpage. The cityshelf.org is where they put a lot of these resources, and we're gathering in a few days. I'm gathering with them. There'll be 75, 100 pastors come together. We pray together. We do things that pastors do in networks, But even more importantly, we're talking about how to move our city forward and what we can do. And just a quick conversation. This is Robert Lupton, who wrote the book Toxic Charity. And he came and spoke to us. Great to help us understand as churches how to deal with charity. We've had in several others. One of the most interesting was, though, one session we had our mayor speak. And he talked about the state of the city to a group of pastors. I don't know that I'd ever heard that quite done like that. And he spoke to us and he talked about, cities moving and this is happening and business is coming in and things are good and all these. And then he did a question and answer. And I remember one of the guys in the room stood up and he said, Mayor, what can we do for the city as churches? What's the best thing that churches can do for our city? And he paused a minute and he thought. He said, you know what? I think the best thing you folks can do is you can teach people to be neighbors. He said most of the calls that come into our city office are neighbors fighting with neighbors. He said, if you guys would talk about, figure out in your churches how to help people be good neighbors, it would change this city. So you notice down here, Neighboring 101, that was the next session. What does it look like to collaborate with your mayor? That's not a bad topic to preach on Sunday, Well, let's be a good neighbor, and there's a few scriptures you can tie to that. And so that collaborative learning environment around pastors, that's a network that has been huge to us. The funny thing was, another guy stood up and asked the mayor, have you signed up, Mayor, for the GLS? And he sheepishly said, no, but I will. So that's how you get him there. But at the end of the day, we've been very excited that our churches have created a network. We have a full-time city movement leader that somebody has funded around this whole idea of moving churches together down the field, but in a learning environment.